Welcome to Stocking the Pantry, a CalFresh Healthy Living podcast from Leah's Pantry. On this show, we discuss any and all things community nutrition, food equity, and nutrition security. We hope to foster collaboration and community, as well as leverage strengths among listeners, guests, and hosts as we share ideas and dreams of building a more equitable future where everyone has access to healthful, nourishing food.
We are live. Thank you for joining us in another episode of Stocking the Pantry. I'm your host for today's show, Carlos Alessandrini. Today I'm very excited because we're talking with Kristine Wolcott, a PhD candidate, counselor, and health and wellness teacher at San Francisco Waldorf High School. Kristine has more than 20 years in the health and wellness field and used to be a Leah's Pantry board member and curriculum developer. She spearheaded the Body Connection curriculum, and we are excited to learn more about this program's initial thought process, as well as knowing how is it that Leah's Pantry solidified as a trauma-informed organization back when Kristine used to be a part of the team. Kristine, thank you so much for being here with us. Before we jump into what Body Connection is, I would like for you to share to our listeners just a little bit more of yourself and your background, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Carlos. It's great to be here. I will say it's been more than 30 years. I'm very old. So 30 years of working in educational, clinical, and carceral settings in the juvenile justice system in various capacities. And of course, I've raised my children during that time. Now I have two grown children, 21 and 25. So my professional and personal journey has those parallel experiences, and then layered on top of that, my scholarly research has kind of shaped this body of work that really now centers around addressing the youth mental health crisis. So I've taken my experiences, my observations. My own children have had health and educational challenges. It's kind of a personal and professional imperative to focus on the key protective factors in human development that promote healthy child development, principles of best practice. So as of late, that's meant doing my wonderful work at the Waldorf High School, kind of working closely with my colleagues, looking at kind of the changing nature and complexity of what is impacting youth health today. So my research is focused on neuroscience, psychology, ecological systems as a general frame for working with today's kids. My working hypothesis just leads me right back to what all of our ancestors knew, which is, we have these basic pillars of health and well-being: connection, movement, rhythm, nourishment. It's not rocket science. And we really are living at such an incredibly exciting time where we have that ancestral wisdom, ancient wisdom traditions on the one hand, and all of this breakthrough research that really points us in the direction of this deep understanding that we're interconnected, interdependent, and it's really a lot of the answers that we seek are hiding in plain sight, which is kind of why we are here right now, just this body connection.
It is almost ironic, isn't it, Kristine, highlighting how you mentioned different categories from neuropsychology, environmental factors, but at the same time, they're all been used in the past by our ancestors. So perfect. Let's take a deeper dive. But before doing so, I just would like for you to take us back to when Leah's Pantry started to solidify itself as a trauma-informed organization back when you were here. How is it that that process took place, and what can you recall about those days here at Leah's Pantry?
Well, in the early years, I think that this concept of trauma-informed was just kind of coming online. A lot of the work being done that really took into consideration the individual, the contextual factors for the individual. I mean, all of this goes back to that landmark adverse childhood experiences study. I can't speak for Adrienne, the wonderful founder and executive director, what compelled her, but I think from where I was standing, one of the great things about Leah's Pantry is how responsive the organization has been to the individuals and the population with which they were working at the time, or we were in those early years. Of course, this all started around Adrienne's kitchen table. But to really understand the experiences that shaped an individual, it's kind of a baseline for being able to curate effective programming. And so Leah's Pantry is working in a number of settings where a lot of the individuals, whether these were families or veterans, recent immigrants, it was clear that these principles that now fall under the trauma-informed umbrella are really just principles of best practice. And Adrienne was determined, I think, to incorporate those into the standard operating procedure, which I think since those early days, that's become a lot more common in pediatric and medical settings and educational settings, clinical settings broadly. Adrienne and Leah's Pantry, of course, were on the cutting edge, especially in this space around nutrition education. So I think Adrienne's always had her finger on the pulse and could just see that this was a way to be most effective at the individual and systemic level.
I can certainly testify that that indeed is a template for our curriculum. Not only that, but how the culture of our organization is currently being a trauma-informed org provides us to be transparent, to be who we are, and be able to deliver effective programming. So I completely agree with that, Kristine, and see how Adrienne's beginning days in the kitchen table could take place. Awesome. So speaking now of curriculum, and more specifically, the body connection curriculum, could you tell us how is it that particular program took place from the beginning? How is it that you helped spearhead the project? You mentioned already that you spoke with different communities, from families, veterans, immigrants. So who is it that you were intending to target this particular program for?
One of the things that makes this trauma-informed lens best practice is that it is really relationship-based, of course, centering on trust, as you mentioned, transparency, these relationships that we have with our students, with participants in the various programs, with our children, with each other. You know, it's really, I see it as a convergence, whether we're talking about contemporary neuroscience or really any topic. I think it's systems, it's a systems orientation. And so working with this lens and working with the autonomic nervous system, the kind of bottom-up approach, that, of course, is fundamental. That's the trauma-informed. We're doing these activities, these practices that help us regulate our nervous system. So working with the primitive brain response, the sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, these simple movement, breath, then relational activities. This sequencing is what makes a trauma-informed approach so efficacious, really. And working with the body, working with the breath, this is the way we address all body systems. It's working with the whole body. It's energy and action. Movement is medicine. And again, we're living at this time where we have all of these scientific papers coming out pointing to all of the benefits and really, you know, big picture reduction in all-cause mortality. It's a key protective factor. So we're living at a time right now where we have so many stressors, and exposures. There's so much fear. And this approach allows us as individuals to kind of recenter this sense of self-agency, self-efficacy by bringing our awareness to our body and our breath. That is centering and allows us to meet what comes next. So it's really a key piece, and it's a low-hanging fruit, and I would argue it's easily incorporated into daily life. It's hygiene, it's self-care, it's compassionate self-care, and these are kind of behavior-ceuticals. So the benefits are immeasurable, cardioprotective, neuroprotective. So it's a win-win.
I love the words sense of agency. It's unbelievable to understand the impacts of how just beneficial it is. Even though it's simple, it's complicated to go about it, unfortunately. However, being able to practice physical movement, the breathing techniques that you point out, your body posture and alignment, it's challenging for certain participants to grasp how those small tweaks in their daily life activities will change enormously how they can approach life, right? I would like to pick your brain on success stories that you've witnessed when participants show that reluctancy, skepticism, sometimes even unfortunately resistance, right? But then again, have them successfully enforce them and see and live the positive outcome.
Well, I think, as any longtime teacher will say, often you don't get direct feedback, and you can only hope that what you're offering is useful. So it is ultimately just seed planting. And I have had experiences in my life where students do give me direct positive feedback. Maybe later they come around, sometimes years later. And I've certainly had plenty of resistance working with teenagers. That may be just part and parcel of what happens. So I think that this whole body connection idea, this whole focus on the somatic, the physical body, is now part of what I teach, no matter what I teach. And I have had the good fortune of working in many settings, as I've said. And for a number of years, I worked in the juvenile justice system where a lot of the girls, I worked specifically on the girls' unit, had life experiences that made it difficult for them to feel safe and centered in any space, and certainly in their own body. So part of what we do is try to meet each individual where they are and understanding what the limits might be. And that's where this trauma-informed lens is so useful. So a lot of skepticism, resistance was kind of baked in. What I was able to do with my colleagues was commit to just showing up every week, creating this rhythm, this space, this consistency. There's a particular student that I will never forget because she was having none of it week after week, just not really even veiled hostility towards everything that I was attempting to offer. And this went on for weeks, I think even months. And one day when I was arriving to set up the space, I kind of was about to stand up, and I felt these arms wrap around me and hold me tight in this big embrace that surprised me. And I realized that when I realized whose arms they were, it was surprising. And it was this one girl who really had not indicated any interest in anything that I had brought to her through my sincere and consistent efforts. And there she was, holding tight. There was a breakthrough, and I think she finally was able to trust that I was there for her. And so I'll go back to what I kind of hypothesize is the foundation for all best practice, and that's relationship-based orientation, not just between one human being and another, but between each one of us as individuals and our bodies. We have these bodies, this one precious life and this one precious body. And for us to kind of hold that with a little bit of reverence. I mean, it's something that is a priority for me as a teacher of young people, that in this big chaotic swirl, in this world, this moment of uncertainty and anxiety, that there's this, maybe it's an alternative framing, or maybe it's more of just an expansion, but there's part of the story that is not told as much as it should be, and that's that human beings are resilient, and this is really the default setting. So there's lots out there that supports this position, that we as human beings have this innate capacity to maintain a healthy equilibrium despite experiencing challenging life events. And so this sense of self-efficacy, this kind of restoring of a sense of control, a locus of control that's internal, that intrinsic sense of personal agency. I think that comes with movement and breath work, because we alone are the captains of our ships. So this just feels very, very important. So again, a win-win.
A win-win indeed. Thank you for sharing that powerful story. I can see how you were a great just anchor for that girl. And part of your story actually reminded me of the importance of the paces now, right? The positive experiences that we're living and how those can counterbalance the adverse ones, the negative ones we had as individuals. As you pointed out, consistency is key, and being willing to be there when sometimes we just don't know. We're planting those seeds, we're doing the best we can by watering them, allowing for them to be in touch with the air, the sun, and hopefully allowing them for grow. So when we're able to focus and emphasize the importance of breathing, these breathing techniques, I'm seeing how sometimes it's just challenging to have folks allow for themselves to go and sync with their body, just applying the breathing techniques. It's not appealing. I've had my fair share of being in the personal training field before my public health career, and notice how it wasn't appealing for my clients, right? Like, yeah, Carlos, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to really lead me to something good, right? Can you elaborate more on the importance of these breathing techniques when embracing the body connection process?
Yes, absolutely. The struggle in getting buy-in, I can relate to that myself. I think we take somewhere around 20,000 breaths per day, or 24-hour cycle. And true confessions, I don't know if I've really paid close attention to more than just a handful thus far today. So what we know now is that the breath is one of the greatest neuromodulators. So there's high value and high impact in bringing awareness to the breath. We have ancient wisdom traditions that recognize this sacred energy, this electromagnetic energy, which can be measured, the chi, the prana, depending on which tradition or discipline. The ancient cultures have names for this vital life force. And I think it's important to frame this type of work within that context, which is that this is what makes us alive. This is electromagnetic energy. We know today that with this new quantum understanding that has flipped contemporary physics on its head, that everything is energy, wavelengths, vibrations, frequencies. So by working with the breath, we have this really accessible anchor that is really an exchange between ourselves as individuals and the world around us, our soul and the cosmos, if you will. I think it's worth talking about that and trying to bring a little bit of wonder, reverence for our bodies and for this vital life force. That being said, I think we all do what we can with what we've got wherever we are. So that's a key piece, is if you only have a few minutes in the morning to bring awareness to your breath, to lengthen the inhale or the exhale, that you just build on that, and that becomes a habit. And I like to talk about all of this body connection curriculum as really compassionate self-care and also basic hygiene. We brush our teeth, we wash our faces. So to take a few minutes to work with the body and work with the breath, it's a little bit of both, the magic and then also the science. It's quite remarkable, and there are wonderful books out there, lots of scientific research. This is wildly impactful for such a simple thing. Elongating the inhale is more activating. Elongating the exhale is more relaxing. So it's like a volume knob that we have available to us wherever we are.
And as you pointed out, being able to use it differently when you're elongating your inhalation and you're elongating your exhalation. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. And the other thing that I got hung up with, Kristine, was something along the lines of do what you can with what you have. And where else was that? Can you repeat that? Because that's
Wherever you are.
and wherever you are. No excuses. Blend it in with your daily activities. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to be in workout clothing. Just do what you can with what you are and whenever you are. More of a reason to understand why now this curriculum is something that we've been able to narrow down to both adults and kids, because we will all be beneficiaries of just being able to move more, breathe better. So this is great, being able to use it in our lifestyles. One more thing that I would like to talk with you about, Kristine, is the thought process of breaking down the curriculum into body systems. And I think you made a reference earlier as far as systems as well. So this was utilized in the curriculum, broken down as different anatomical systems. And of course, it's very common to hear when we're talking about fitness, cardiovascular, musculoskeletal, respiratory system, maybe even the nervous systems. But you don't necessarily hear that we're going to work on the immune system, the digestive systems. How is that you were able to make that distinction and at the same time work on the importance of presenting it that way?
So I think that it's important for us to have an understanding and appreciation for the complexity of our bodies. And each system, yes, can be identified, tracked, and measured, but there is no way to disaggregate one system from the other. So the quote, I think it's by Thoreau, you find if you pull at one thing in nature, it's connected to everything else. Something like that. And this is really that. Our bodies are complex systems, and when you address one part of the body, you're really having an effect on every part of the body. And I think there's a shift in modern medicine now where there's a movement away from this highly specialized and even fragmented way of looking at the human body, but rather now you have a fast-growing number of physicians that are integrative, functional medical doctors, recognizing this truth, which is we have these complex systems, and taking that lens is really essential. So it's also, I think, empowering because every little thing we do that is supportive, every kind of protective factor, the movement, time in nature, social connection, eating the nourishing foods, all of those things have systemic benefits, protective or risk factors, depending on the decisions we make. And that's really where the personal agency and empowerment comes in. The more we know about how the systems work together, the more we can make these decisions that are informed. Our body's always giving us feedback, whether it's how we sleep, our digestive process, how well our bodies maintain a healthy rhythm, whether we get rashes. We get these messages. Some of them are whispers, some of them are shouts from our bodies. So this understanding of, and again, reverence for the complexity of the human body is a nice offset from the more fragmented wisdom that has kind of guided a lot of policy in the past few decades. It comes back to this relational attunement that we can look at the benefits of a specific movement on a system. The benefits are really impossible to measure because the bodies are so complex. So this is a really hopeful framing, I think. And part of what I think we need to be doing now, even as we use these guiding principles of the trauma-informed approach, is really make sure that it's rooted in this understanding of the intelligence, this innate healing intelligence, the regenerative capacities of the human body. And when the conditions are right, our bodies flourish. That's really the story of humanity, that we're resilient and that our bodies are adaptable, and that when we can create the optimum conditions, which are not rocket science, just like our ancestors lived. And if you look around the world where the people, they have pockets, the blue zones, all of these longevity studies where people are living into their hundreds and super centenarians living into their hundred and teens, they're living in a more harmonious way. And modern life here just has kind of pulled us away from this innate wisdom. So we don't really have to invent any new things. We just have to remember and keep that consciousness that aligns us with this innate intelligence.
By just listening to our bodies.
Yes.
And it also reminds me how the systems are interconnected the same way that we are interconnected with our neighbors, our communities, counties, states, countries, continents, if you want, for that matter, right? So thank you for all that wisdom, Kristine. All right, that's been quite a combo, folks. So I would like to move on, Kristine, with one of Stocking the Pantry must questions. And that is, what do you stock your pantry with?
I am a farmer's market super fan. So I have lots of friends at my local farmer's market, markets plural. And living in the Bay Area, we're very spoiled. We have so many incredible farmers markets all week long. So lots of fresh seasonal produce, and then kind of what is always living, and maybe to an extreme, is my collection of salts. I have lots and lots of salts. Potentially, I'm a salt hoarder. And I also have a lot of honeys, different kinds of honey infusions, saffron and herbal honeys, all kinds of honey-related products. So I think I'm a salt and honey hoarder, and then with a changing cast of vegetable and fruit characters on my kitchen counter.
Salt and honey. Sometimes I love adding those to my dressings and vinaigrettes. They add a lot of kick to those. And as a matter of fact, your story about the farmer's market reminded me, and I'll share with you that I used to work at one here in San Diego, and our signature item was artichokes. One of the things that I love the most about that gig is the stories that I shared of recipes with the customers. And I've been a fan of artichokes since I can remember. And I learned so many different recipes by talking to them and sharing, and like, have you tried this? What about just roasting them? And oh my God, let's not get started. Otherwise, we'll get hungry now.
I am hungry.
So we should start cooking some artichokes, Kristine.
Yeah, I have some right there waiting to be cooked. Now you've inspired me.
Nice. Let's go about it. Kristine, it's been a delight hearing you, learning more of how we can just embrace a healthier lifestyle, but just implementing these simple techniques. So, thank you so much again for your time, for the wisdom, and for all the work you do at the same time. We'll see you folks on the next episode of Stock in the Pantry. Hasta la próxima.
Thank you so much for hanging with us. You can find us online at leaspantry.org, on Instagram at leaspantry.org, or email us at podcast@leaspantry.org.
This podcast is a product of Leah's Pantry, made possible by funding from the United States Department of Agriculture and their Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Visit calfreshhealthyliving.org to learn tips on how to make the healthy choice the easy choice. Stocking the Pantry is hosted by me, Tanisha Atwell,
Carlos Alessandrini,
And me, Colby D'Onofrio.
The show is produced by Emma Lehman.
Stocking the Pantry invites guests with a wide variety of opinions and perspectives. Guest opinions are their own and do not represent the views of Leah's Pantry.